Today we're going to be talking about what's new with Mercury Editor. Mercury Editor, again, for those of y'all who don't know, is a drag and drop um, editing approach and kind of a module that improves the UI for content authors, specifically with marketers and editorial folks in mind. Today, what we're going to cover specifically is first just dig in a little bit on an overview of what Mercury Editor is, what it does, what its key features are, kind of why we built it in the first place. Second, I want to spend some time talking about the Mercury Editor ecosystem and make sure everybody can see my screen okay. I want to talk a little bit about the Mercury Editor ecosystem and the modules that Mercury Editor is based on. That, from my opinion, is super important. One thing we are not trying to do with Mercury is in any way change or rebuild Drupal's approach to working with content, storing content, kind of the content storage model in Drupal. What we are trying to change and significantly change is the user experience around how authors interact with content in Drupal and how authors actually get content into Drupal. And I'll talk a little bit about the module ecosystem, which will hopefully make some of that clear about how that works. I'm going to chat a little about what's new. Again, it's been a little while since we did one of these. Mercury Editor, I think 2.2x has a stable release now. And I'll just chat briefly about what that means and what it has meant getting to a stable release. And then we will do a demo. I'm going to demo 3 different sites. We'll do a demo of a site that continues to be one of my favorites, something that a lot of you all have probably already seen for Neutrino Day for the Sanford Underground Research Facility, which does, I think, a great job of just showing kind of the simplicity and the power of Mercury Editor for content authors. Then we'll take a look at a newer project that was just recently launched with one of the Smithsonian museums, specifically the Lemelson Center for Invention and Innovation. And then we'll take a look at some of the newer and maybe more specific features of Mercury in just a really simple Drupal 10 install. So a brand new install, really simple site. And then finally, we'll have plenty of time for questions. So with that, let's talk a little bit about what Mercury Editor is. So first of all, Mercury Editor is probably quite obviously a Drupal module. There was a time when Mercury Editor really meant a collection of customizations applied to a suite of modules that our team was working on. And that's something that we have moved away from. And anymore, Mercury Editor is simply a Drupal module. It can be downloaded on Drupal.org and installed on virtually any Drupal 10 or 11 website. Mercury provides no-code drag and drop editing. It's built on layout paragraphs, which in turn is built on paragraphs, and really works with paragraphs, the paragraphs module in Drupal, to provide drag and drop really easy content editing that's focused on the needs of marketers and editorial staff. Mercury Mercury is based around custom component libraries. And when we think about components of Mercury, those are basically synonymous with paragraph types. I know this namespace can get a little bit complicated, especially with single directory components, which I'm happy to talk more about as we get into the Q&A part of this presentation. But when we talk about components here, we're really talking about paragraph types or the different types of discrete pieces of content, chunks of content that can be added and rearranged with Mercury. Mercury provides styles management. We'll show a couple different examples of that, of how that works with some example sites, but it essentially provides a centralized place for developers to manage style libraries that can be provided to all of the different component types. So your content authors can choose styles, can choose stylistic kind of embellishments, graphic elements, backgrounds, things like that for various components. And then finally, again, Mercury provides a really streamlined user interface that is focused on the needs of editorial and marketing staff. And this is the number one thing. This is what we're really dedicated to in our work and in our work around Mercury is addressing the needs of marketers and editorial staff and in creating really easy to use systems for working directly with content. And in that sense, Mercury Editor is not really we don't see it as a site builder's tool. We see it as a tool for, again, marketers editorial staff, people who need to create content in their Drupal websites, need to create, dynamic, really visual marketing focused pages, or pages that they kind of tell a story in a rich visual way. Okay, that's a little bit just about what Mercury is. I'm going to talk through the ecosystem. These are all kind of the modules that Mercury is either based on or makes use of in some way that are all available on Drupal.org. First and foremost, Mercury Editor itself is a Drupal module, as I said before. I think the current release is 2.2.0 is the current stable release. It is the first stable release in 2.2. The 2.2 branch features a number of performance optimizations, enhancements, some UI enhancements to previous versions. Mercury is based on the paragraphs module. When we talk about content components, that's really what we're talking about, is paragraph types or discrete paragraphs that kind of build up a page. I've put in here just the number of installs just to give folks a sense for the adoption and kind of the how much these modules, these systems are already used. So the paragraphs module in particular has massive adoption with over 250,000 installs based on Drupal.org. In turn, Mercury is based also on layout paragraphs, which is another module that I maintain along with a couple of other folks. Layout paragraphs itself has been growing significantly. I think we have twice as many installs today as we did the last time we did this presentation. We're at 12,000 plus for layout paragraphs. Layout paragraphs combines the layout API with the paragraphs module to allow content editors to easily drag around paragraphs in admin forms, and the Mercury editor brings that to the live preview, which we'll get into here in a bit. Mercury is also based on the layout API, which is in Drupal core. And again, a big theme here is that we're using widely used contributor modules or functionality that's available in core. Mercury editor uses style options, the style options module, as its basis, again, for providing a styles library and centralized management of styles that can be applied to various components. The Mercury layouts module is a repository for some more complex layout types. This is something that we are standardizing more and more on in our work. One thing I'm going to demo today is more complex container type sections or container type layouts, tabs and accordions. And I want to show a little bit about how we approach tabs and accordions. It's a little different maybe than how folks may have approached this in the past with kind of nested paragraph fields. We instead are using layout containers, and that'll make more sense as we get into a demo, but that's another piece of the overall ecosystem here. And then finally, layout paragraphs restrictions is a module for managing what content can be added into what contexts. This is the module that you would use if you wanted to say, this particular card style component can be added in the left column, but never in the right column. You can set up simple rules in layout paragraphs restrictions that lets you do exactly that. One more, finally, Mercury Editor Live Edit is a module that brings editing of text, both rich text editing as well as simple text editing to the front end, and we'll demo that as well. But this allows content authors to simply click on the text that they want to edit, make those edits live. Something similar to the way Quick Edit used to work, although this is only in the context of Mercury Editor, and in some ways is a little bit more seamless than what Quick Edit had been before. Again, you simply click on the text and start editing. Again, just want to touch on adoption for layout paragraphs. Historically, I've shown this slide when we've done this presentation, when I've done this presentation, just to say that layout paragraphs is building a lot of momentum and continues to grow. Obviously, this is something people are finding really valuable, and this is a major ingredient for Mercury. So when people think about Mercury Editor and can it be used for their website and kind of is it ready for production sites, it is largely based on layout paragraphs, which is in fairly wide use and still growing significantly today. With the latest 2.2x release, we have performance enhancements, UI refinements, and a number of bug fixes, of course, which has made Mercury really stable in a broad range of environments. Mercury Editor works virtually on any Drupal 10 or 11 website. Turn it on, and it immediately adds value, immediately adds functionality for this kind of live preview component. A big design feature of Mercury is that it can be installed or uninstalled without impacting any of the other website functionality in your website. So you can, embrace Mercury Editor, use that for editing content. All it does is improve the UI for content editors. If for some reason in the future your organization decided to move away from Mercury, uninstall Mercury, everything still works as it did, except that now when you log into the admin, you're not using this kind of improved admin experience, this improved admin or content UI. Mercury, the Mercury module itself has end-to-end automated testing with Cypress. So every time code is committed to Drupal.org, Cypress tests run automatically in a Tugboat instance. And this provides us really, really great automated test coverage as the system gets kind of more and more complex. And then there's improved documentation on the project page, both on the Mercury Editor project page and some of the other project pages in the ecosystem. And again, the ecosystem itself is growing with Mercury layouts, which one more time is just a repository for more complex layout types that are becoming more and more the norm for our work. Mercury Editor Live Edit for live editing text content, and layout paragraph restrictions for managing governance, with a number of other modules coming soon as we continue to kind of add to this ecosystem. That's Mercury Editor described just in kind of a nutshell and some of what's new. With that, I'm going to exit out of this presentation and move over to demos. So I mentioned this before. One of my favorite sites to demo for just showing how Mercury Editor works is this Neutrino Day website. Neutrino Day is a website that it advertises or markets a free STEM festival put on by the Sanford Underground Research Facility every year. We worked on a variety, on a kind of a broad range of digital products for Sanford or SURF, again, Sanford Underground Research Facility. This was one of them. This was one of the simpler websites, but I think does a really great job of just showing out of the box what Mercury Editor can do. We're showing at a glance what Mercury Editor can do, or kind of how content editing works with Mercury. So we can see this kind of simple homepage that has some content, again, that is promoting the event. We have a video posted. We have some information about the speakers, and some other visual content as we scroll through. I'm just going to recreate this page. So I'm going to go into the admin content area. Everything that's happening on the left so far, everything that we're looking at, none of what we're looking at so far is Mercury Editor specific. This is using the Gin admin theme, which hopefully most of you all are familiar with, and many of you are using. If you're not, definitely highly recommend checking that out. I think Gin will also be the default theme for Drupal CMS, or is the default theme for Drupal CMS, obviously super widely used. So Gin provides this kind of flyout menu. I'll go to the admin content section, click on add content, and over to basic page. Now we're looking at Mercury Editor. Mercury Editor essentially takes over the content creation and content edit pages in a Drupal website. The typical node form that everyone is probably familiar with on this call is moved into this right-hand edit tray, kind of moved out of the way. This is using a special form mode called Mercury Editor. So it gives you the ability to customize the form for Mercury Editor specifically and kind of make it more simple if you would like to. We have some clients who are having kind of a simpler version of this form and then linking to the full version. But in any case, it moves the form over into the right-hand side and provides this live preview on the left with this single layout paragraph field for adding new content, which by default simply says add section. I'll click into add a new section. We have, essentially just these 5 different options. I'm going to stay with a 1-column section, go over to styles, and choose from this list of styles. This is using style options to provide the styles. These are essentially just classes that are added to content once they're chosen. Classes and the options themselves have these custom images so that editors can see what they're doing. So I'll choose option 9, just kind of arbitrarily named, hit save. It has dropped the section onto the page and dropped it onto the page with this style applied. I'm going to kind of sneak back here and click the plus button, which is kind of hiding out in the back a little bit. Go to heading. I'm going to grab some text from off screen. and paste in the heading. In this particular instance, we are supporting a few tags in here. I'll make this a heading 2 and go over to styles, and we'll go with the normal style, hit save. And with the normal style, we get that lighter weight and the bold text. And as we can see, that component dropped immediately into the preview pane here. There's a plus button that's kind of hidden behind this add section to add a component below heading. I'm gonna, since I can't see that one, I'm just gonna use the top one, add this custom, let's see, date and location component. Again, when we think about components, these are really paragraph types. If you're familiar with the paragraph module in Drupal, I'm going to add the date, the location of Lead, South Dakota. Again, this particular component, this kind of date location lockup being specific to this project and this client. Again, I'm going to wrap that in some bold tags just so that it looks a little nicer. Hit save, and it drops that component onto the canvas. I want this component, this date and location below the heading. I can drag that below the heading just by grabbing the drag handle. I can also hit these up and down arrows to slide that up or down and put that where I want. I'll keep going. Next, I'm just going to add some simple text. Opens up a text dialog with CK editor. Grab some text from off screen, paste this in place, hit save. Again, this text is now above the component that I want it to be below, so I can easily drag this stuff around to where I want it to be. I mentioned Mercury Editor Live Edit. Live Edit allows you to just click on the text, and you're immediately actually editing the text. So in this case, I'm going to say take our survey and make this a link and link it to the survey page. And once I've done that, I can change the styles. I'll choose the yellow button style, and we can see all of our styles applied. So this gives you both the convenience of editing text in place, and also if you're using the CSS styles option in CK Editor, because you're actually editing in the front end, you get to see those edits, or you get to see the visual style take effect, immediately in the front end. At any point, I can hit save. There's a preview for mobile as well as desktop. We're in the desktop version here. If I go over to mobile, it'll collapse down to these predetermined mobile sizes. There are just 4 in here. These are all just sizes that we kind of threw in as defaults. There are settings for managing all of this on the Mercury Editor settings page, so you can add any of the defaults that you want to support for your organization. I'll keep going here. We'll add another 1-column section. This time I'm going to add some media. I'm going to reach back there and find the plus button. Mercury is probably obvious, but Mercury is applying this edit UI directly on top of the styles for the front end of your site. So things like margin in the layouts, all of this is coming from the front end of your site. And it can lead to things like this, where you have section buttons overlapping those plus buttons. And of course, there are ways to style around that for the admin as well. I'm going to go in here and add some media. We'll add a video. Just choose one of these videos, hit insert. Super easy to integrate with media and just drop media in from the media library. We'll keep going here, add another section. I'm going to add this Meet the Speakers content. We'll start with just a 1-column section and drop in a heading and say Meet the Speakers. Again, I'm going to wrap that in a bold tag. This one I'll make a link to the speakers page. And under styles, I'll choose normal and give it an arrow. That drops that heading in place. I'm going to add another section. I'm going to try adding a 3-column section here. One thing that we wanted to support is making design decisions directly in the browser and allowing, again, content editors to choose from a predefined style library or style guide design system as they add components. So in this case, I'm going to add a speaker. We'll just go down to person reference. I'll add Brian Mallow. We have this alternative title, so we could say something like Meet Brian if we wanted to. Brian Mallow, and then for styles, I'm going to go to the card style. Hit save, and it drops Brian's reference in place. I'm going to just duplicate this and then drag it over, just so I don't have to go through those steps again. And now that I moved Brian over, I'll hit edit and we'll change this to Chief Henry Red Cloud, get rid of this alternate title, hit save. That's looking pretty good. We'll add one more here, bring it over. This time we'll replace Chief Henry Red Cloud with Sam. And this is looking pretty good. Again, works in the predefined set of styles, kind of the design system that was created for this project. Ultimately, they wanted to go with a different design, with a different look for the way these speakers are displayed. And what they instead chose was to add another section. We'll drop Brian up into our new section, change this reference to featured, change the style to featured, and you can see it's just changed the display mode for this piece of content. I'm going to add another section. We'll do another one column, drag Chief Henry Red Cloud into this section, go over to styles, and in this case, we'll just choose default. And then for Sam, I'm just going to edit this section. One feature, this is actually from layout paragraphs. Layout paragraphs allows you to switch between different layout types. So you don't have to remove a layout and recreate it with a different column structure. You can just make the choice right here. I'm going to go from 3 columns to 1. It asks me what I want to do with the item that's in that third column, which will no longer exist. And since I'm moving to a 1 column, there's only a single column I can choose from, which is content, so that's fine. Hit save, and it does exactly what you'd expect. Goes down to 1 column, leaves Sam in that first column or that content column. Again, I'm going to edit Sam. We'll change this to default, hit save. These all look the same in this presentation. I think if I get rid of this edit panel and take a look at what this would look like sort of in a full expanded window, we can see how the featured display mode looks a little bit different than the standard display modes. And that was kind of ultimately what they wanted to go with for their speakers and how they present their speakers. Again, at any point I can hit save and then done, which will bounce me out of the editor. We're now looking at the live page that we just edited, which looks really similar, well on its way anyways, to looking like that homepage. And that is how Mercury is being used in Neutrino Day. I'm going to move along and show a different project. This is for the Lemelson Center for the Study of Innovation and Invention at the Smithsonian. The Lemelson Center is all about exactly what it sounds like. It's all about the study of invention and innovation, celebrating innovation and invention, and really highlighting the importance of innovation and the importance of invention throughout our history, and then also moving forward. So providing tools for people to kind of think about the impact and the importance of innovation and invention, as well as access impact stories or access invention stories from the past. Has a really kind of dynamic and visually compelling design, very much focused on storytelling and on creating unique types of content that just do a really good job of telling these really rich, dynamic stories about the importance of these themes and how to apply that in daily life. Content authors for this project needed a way to create this kind of content and tell these types of rich stories in an ongoing way and in a way into the future. And that was really a perfect use case for Mercury Editor. I'm just going to click over to a dev version of this. Here we are looking at a dev version that's hosted locally on my machine just for demo purposes. We can take a quick look, and I just wanted to kind of show again, use this as an example for some other ways that Mercury is being used. I'm going to edit this homepage. The homepage is just a node. So again, we're back in the node edit screen that has been taken over by Mercury. The edit form has been moved over to the right. And on the left-hand side, we can see this list of components that are all being managed by Mercury Editor. If we just kind of go down through the list, we have this homepage hero type. The homepage in this case is comprised of a number of more complex components to again kind of tell the story and to construct this layout. We start with the homepage hero. If we click into that, we can see the options that are available there, and some of the nested paragraphs that are available there. Again, these components are really just paragraph types. So when we're editing components, we're literally editing paragraphs. Nested paragraph fields work as much as possible, and we'll get into this in a bit as well. We try to structure components so that nesting of components happens at the layout level and not paragraph level. I can explain a little bit more about what that means as we get into the more basic demo for a brand new Drupal 10 website. Take a look at the featured stories. The featured stories is just a component that kind of dynamically shows this view of stories. The featured link or card section, and again, just gives an example of the kind of more complex components that are available. If I click the plus button, we can see all of the different components that are available in this context. Again, just to get a sense for the different kinds of things that Mercury can do or has been used for. I'm actually going to move into a different type of content here. We're going to go into an invention story and edit this piece of content and take a look at some of the content again in Mercury here. As we scroll down, there's a lot of animations that are happening. We have a mix of single column and multi-column layouts. We can take a look at some of the style options here. If I go into content, click on styles, lots of different icon types. So this icon type is pulling from style options, from the options available in style options. If I click edit, go into styles, we can change that, hit save. We'll see that applied automatically. The image goes away just because of the way the animation library is working. If I save, it'll replay that animation and bring all of that content back. And we can, again, just get a sense for how that's working as we move down the page. These sections, there is a mix on a number of these pages of 2-column and 1-column sections. As I was saying before, we can edit columns, change the number of columns to 2, and then do something like in this context, we could go in here, add a call out. Some test content, hit save, drops that immediately into the preview. And again, just gives a sense for how that's working and what some of the options are there. All right, happy to answer any other questions about this as we get into Q&A here in a few minutes. One thing that we're making a lot of use of in the context of Lemelsen is layout paragraph restrictions. So the list of what you can add in this context is very different than the list of what you can add on the homepage. And I'm going to show how that works here in a minute when we get into this simpler website, which is up next, up right now. So again, just a quick look at another client project. Now we'll bounce over to a brand new Drupal 10 website and kind of talk through some of the more maybe lesser known features of Mercury and some of the newer features of Mercury. This is a pretty simple Drupal 10 install with a really small list of modules installed. Going to add some content. There's a test content type that is actually provided by one of the test modules in the Mercury Editor suite of test modules, just called Mercury Editor test content type. I'm going to click into this content type or add a new piece of content for this. Click the plus button, start with a section. We'll do a 2-column section, add some text on the left, and add maybe an image on the right. And again, gives everyone hopefully a sense for what this looks like directly out of the box without anything else really installed. So we have our image on the left, text, or rather image on the left, text on the right. I said that wrong both times, but everyone can see where the text is and where the image is. I can drag these components around inside these layouts. I can click down to the bottom here and add a new section. We'll go with a 3-column section this time, add new content to my 3-column. And again, hopefully this is giving everyone an idea of what this kind of drag and drop experience is like. One module that is installed on this particular test site is that Mercury Editor Live Edit module, which provides live editing of text. I can I can just click onto the text for the title and call this my new page. It updates automatically on the left. It's also updating on the right. Hit save. It applies that change. I can click over here on my text on the right here and be editing with the correct rich edit settings applied to this content type, make my edits, and actually see what these will look like, see an exact representation of what these will look like in real time as I'm adding text. And to kind of apply edits, just click outside of that text area and those are applied, and again, hit save, and those saves are made. That again is what Mercury Editor looks like right out of the box if just installed on a blank Drupal 10 website. And I think actually with everything we've seen except for live edit, if you just use Composer and require Mercury Editor, it will install everything you need to see this exact same demo, to see this exact same content. And if you also install the test module, Mercury Editor Setup Test, which ships with Mercury Editor in the tests subfolder, it will install this content type for you as well, and you can hit the ground running, experimenting with the features of Mercury Editor. I did want to dive in just really quickly to a couple other features provided by some other modules, starting with some of the layouts that are in Mercury layouts, specifically the tabs and accordions layouts. Something that the approach we used to take for nested content like tabs and accordions was paragraph types, paragraph reference fields within paragraph reference fields. For those who are more technical on the call and have some experience developing with paragraphs and doing some just some of the dev work here, that can pose performance problems pretty quickly, having paragraphs nested inside of paragraphs. And in addition to posing some performance challenges, from my perspective, that approach also poses problems from a admin UI perspective, from an admin usability perspective. And we really wanted to make the process of working with things like tabs and accordions, dragging content into them and out of them as simple as possible. So the approach we've taken is to use layout containers, layout plugins, instead of paragraph types, and to really think about nested content in terms of content that can go inside of a layout versus content that is attached to another paragraph. So the Mercury Layouts module provides some layout plugins, two in particular that I'll demo here for tabs and accordions. That module has been installed. To show how that works, I'm going to add a new paragraph type. We'll call it accordion. I'm going to turn on the layout paragraph behavior, which just means this paragraph type can be used as a layout paragraph container or as a section. We can see what all the different layouts are that are available. These two at the bottom are what we're going to be looking at. I'm going to choose accordion. I'll turn on style options, although I have none configured for this type, so it doesn't really matter. And then save and manage fields. I don't really need any fields available for my accordion. I just want the accordion, so I can really just leave that as is. I'll go back to paragraph types. We're going to do the exact same thing for tabs and say tabs, choose layout paragraphs, tabs, turn on style options, and hit save. So now we have these two new paragraph types that really just serve as these layout containers that are set to use layout paragraphs, which means they can be a layout container. They use a particular layout type to do kind of what they do. Tabs, again, and accordion. If I go to my content types and take a look at configuration for the Mercury Editor test type, we'll just look at, let's see here, manage fields, take a look at this test content field. We can see that all of the, oh, nope, they're not. So we'll include tabs and accordions. I had thought that that was set the reverse. I had thought that this was set up so that it was set to exclude and had none of these selected. It's the other way around. So we have to actually include these as something that can be used for that content type. Okay, that's all set. Let's go to create some content. Add content, add a new content type, hit the plus button. And inside this layout category, we now have tabs and accordions. As additional layout types that we can use. So we'll take a look at sections. Sections is using the multi-column, the two-column, etc. layout plugin to do what it does. In turn, tabs and accordions are using the tabs layout plugin, which is new and is included in that Mercury layouts module. And for accordions, same thing. We're using the accordion layout plugin that's available or that is added from that Mercury layouts module. So both of those are available in that module. They're available in the latest dev release of that module. These that in addition to this kind of concept that tabs and accordions should really be layout containers. And what that means is if I hit the plus button inside a tab, I get the same list of options that I get if I was inside of a layout. So I can go into my tab, add some new text inside tab 1, click over to tab 2, add some new text for tab 2. The idea is that this content inside tabs is really no different than the content that's used in other contexts. And I can pull this content out, drop it into another section, move over to second tab, bring it back in if I like, and manage content inside these tabs just like it was any other layout because it is in fact another layout. Now for tabs and accordions, something that was really important is the idea of having a dynamic number of regions. And so these are all based on a common, they all inherit from a common class, a common plugin that supports dynamic regions. And with that dynamic region class, I can go in and add a new tab. It has just added tab 3. I can click on tab 3, hit edit, call this whatever I like. Again, clicking outside of that simply saves the content. Pull tab 2 text out, click over to my latest tab, and bring that the text into that tab. Since this is just a section, it can also be dropped inside another section. So since this is just a component, we can drag this around however we wish and layer these as deep as we want within the settings that are set up for this particular content type. And I can show that in a minute too if people are interested, but that's basically how that works. These items can be renamed. Again, at any point we can hit save. And that is basically how that is working and how that's the value of Mercury layouts is that it provides, again, a repository for some of these more complex layouts. It's something that we're standardizing more and more on. I should say that Mercury layouts also provide some simple 1 and 2 column layouts, but where I really see some of the strongest value, especially for folks who maintain their own layouts, is in areas like this, where it's providing these layout containers and also providing all of the functionality for editing the number of containers, for adding to the number of containers. All right, that's just a brief look at accordions. I want to talk just for a second about layout paragraph restrictions. So we'll go into the admin. Let's see here. I'll hit save and done and go over to the admin section, take a look at layout paragraph restrictions, which this is pulling from the layout paragraph restrictions module. This allows the purpose of this module is to allow site builders, site maintainers to easily create governance rules around what can be created where. So one thing that we looked at a second ago, now that I've created these new section types of tabs and accordions, if I create new content, we see those listed at the same level as everything else. And it's in some implementations, it's important for content editors to have to start with a section, to only be able to start with a section. They really don't want tabs or accordions at the root level, or for that matter, anything else, any of these other items at the root level. For that, we can use layout paragraph restrictions. This uses a pretty simple YAML configuration format, which is described on the module page for the module for layout paragraph restrictions, the layout paragraph restrictions module. We give this an arbitrary name. We define the context that this applies to. In this case, we're saying this context or this rule applies to the entity type being a node, the entity bundle or the content type being this me_test_ct content type. This just says the field name, and this says the root region, which basically means if there's no region, if you're adding this at the root level, this rule applies. And then the rule itself, the restriction, just says that the only component that can be added is the section component. When I hit save, go back to my screen, hit the plus button, it immediately launches me into that section form because it's the only component that is available in this context. Similarly, we could say that we don't want to be able to create accordions and tabs inside a 3-column layout. We only want to be able to do that at the root level, or maybe we only want to be able to do that in a single column layout. A way to do that would be to add to our restriction settings another configuration. Again, an arbitrary name. So this particular line right here can be anything you want it to be. The context, there are actually 3 contexts this applies to. If we're in the first region, the second region, or the third region, we're not going to allow tabs and we're not going to allow accordions. Hit save, the plus button, tabs and accordions are now missing from that restriction. And that gives us a way to restrict, again, what can be added into what context. It can get fairly complicated as rules are combined and as restrictions are combined. Something else, for those of you who are developers, either in an agency setting or internal, this module, layout paragraph restrictions, is also a really good example of just how to work with the APIs and layout paragraphs to create restrictions. So you can create your own programmatic restrictions that don't even require this module using this module, like just kind of looking at the source code in this module to see how that's done. There's some really great APIs available in layout paragraphs for saying, for changing what components are available depending on the context. And this module is doing exactly that. I'll just show a couple more things here, and then we'll move on to questions. I want to look at some of the Mercury editor settings here, something that I just skipped right over. I think I had done this ahead of the call. If initially these would have been unchecked, I actually checked them ahead of the call while I was just preparing for this, or ahead of this presentation. Let's go in and add a 1-column section. Inside of our 1-column, we'll add tabs. If I don't have those items checked, the default behavior after I created the tabs content type would be to show me this pop-up form. There's no fields associated with the form, and there's only a single layout available. So basically, it shows me nothing. It just is empty. That step is totally unnecessary. There are sometimes components that just don't need the component form as the first step. That's what this skip form settings option is all about. You can say for the accordions and tabs, we just want to skip the form altogether. So if a user adds a new tab, we just want to get right to the tab, show the tab immediately without having that form. So we can see how that's working. And then the last thing I think that I'll show you all is just menu settings and how menu settings work. See if this works for our purposes here. I'm going to throw this in here. So menu settings allows you to specify with, again, a pretty simple YAML format, some containers, some sections for the components in that component menu. I'm going to hit save here, see if this, I don't think I actually tried this earlier. We'll see how this works. So if I hit plus, it's not going to work there because that's inside of because we have this rule. Okay, great. So all that does, these settings define these different kind of categories for that menu. So we have the layout category, and we're saying the only component we want in the layout category is this test section. Then we have tabs and accordions. We want the label for that to be tabs and accordions, and that's going to have the tabs and accordion components, which is exactly what we're seeing right here. And then everything else is going to go in this content section. And the reason that we know it's everything else is we set default to true. We explicitly say that test text goes in there, but because default is set to true, every other component that doesn't otherwise have a group also goes in there, and we get this whole list.